The biggest challenge of having a single child is the intensity of the parenting getting focused on one human.
The biggest challenge of having siblings is, so you use tarot in coaching. Why would we do that?
The reason tarot is such a powerful tool for personal growth is that it...
Hello and welcome to Finding Flow Parenting, the podcast where we help you to find more flow, ease and joy in family life. With me, your host, Emily Hughes, conscious parenting coach and mum of two. Each week, I'll be joined by a special guest to explore a question posed by you, my lovely audience. Expect expansive reframes, tools, self-awareness, and a whole load of empathy. Parenting is a wild ride, but together we've got this. And I'm super delighted to be joined by Victoria Smith Murphy today. Victoria is an executive coach and founder of two businesses, a leadership consultancy and a tarot training school. Her mission is to make space for the sacred in everyday life, especially in the corporate world. She holds an MSc in consciousness and spirituality and has been studying tarot as a tool for psycho-spiritual growth for a decade. She works primarily with corporate leaders who want to balance commercial success and a deeply meaningful life. And Victoria and I are also friends, and our kids are friends. So I'm super excited to bring her on the podcast today. Welcome, Victoria.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to see where we travel.
Great. And our question today will really resonate with some people. And this is definitely, I've got a few clients in this situation. So this is the question. I'm a parent with one child. Sometimes our family dynamic feels intense. And I'm curious, what are the realities of raising a solo child versus siblings? And how does it change at different ages? So Victoria, you've got one child. What thoughts are coming up for you, first of all, when you hear that question?
So I do. I have one child, a boy who is nearly 8. So obviously, he's at school with your youngest, and they're good friends. And I suppose the first thing to say is any of us can only have, sort of one perspective because, I'm only a parent of a single child and you are only a parent of multiples. So I think it will be an interesting conversation for us to have. Like, what's my lived experience of parenting with a single child? What's your lived experience of parenting with siblings? Recognizing that, we can only have one perspective. And I suppose, when I think of this question, actually, it reminds me of a truth that we talk about in tarot, which is that everything in life has a gift and a shadow. So every archetype within a tarot deck, there's 78 cards, each of them are an archetype. Every archetype has a gift and a shadow, regardless of how challenging or lighthearted each of those archetypes are. So I suppose that's where I would start, is what's the gift of having a single child? What's the shadow of having a single child? What's the gift of having siblings? What's the shadow of having siblings? As a parent of a single child, what I currently experience as the gift is, well, there's a few. First of all, I think the dynamic between the three of us, I co-parent with my husband, so we are a family of 3. And it's a really lovely dynamic because there isn't the kids versus adults that I grew up with. As I have an older sister, so it was always the girls and the parents, whereas it's me, Scott, and Hudson as a triad. And there is something about that triad that means there's always space for everybody. There's always, I think you naturally, with that kind of odd number and with that sort of parents and child as a triad, you naturally fall into a kind of consideration of what does each person want and need rather than what do the kids need, what do the adults need. And then so I think that's the first gift. I think the second gift is the time and space that we have as parents. You know, having just one child means that we do have a lot of time, we do have a lot of space, and my sense is our house is quite a calm house generally. That's probably also to do with our energies. You know, we're all quite like not calm people, but fairly quiet people.
Mhm.
And then I suppose shall I pause there with the gifts and then we explore the gifts of having siblings and then we can talk about the shadows?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting way of thinking about it. So yeah, I think it's really interesting you spoke about triads, because
Yeah,
I've got a unit in the course that I take my clients through
yeah,
on siblings, and one of the things we talk about there is dyads. So dyads is
mm,
two people,
yeah,
and basically the more children you have, the more dyads you have
yeah,
to manage within your family. And
yes.
the strength of a family is really down to the strength of its individual dyads. It's one way that we
Oh, I
look at like
love
having
that.
siblings. You know, so the more kids you have, the more dyads you have to manage, the more complexity there is within it. I think maybe one of the gifts that I see in having um, two children um, is actually, for me, it's been, my children are in some ways quite similar, but in many ways extremely different. And
Mm,
I think one of the gifts of having children that are very different is a little bit of perspective for me,
yeah,
that maybe
mm,
my influence upon these children is not quite as big
yeah,
as I perhaps, when I just had the one child, thought that it was.
mm,
Um, yeah, and I think it's a little bit like we can
mm,
get in the mindset of feeling like everything we do has impact upon this child. But
mm.
actually, sometimes seeing how different my kids are has just made me sort of almost surrender a little bit to the universe of these kids are just who they are,
Yeah.
and it's my job to help them on that path. But
Mm.
essentially, a little bit, some of this is out of my control.
Yeah, and I think to us, and not it's not an exact sort of tit for tat, but like I think there
Yeah.
is probably an element of what you've just said as the gift of having siblings that comes up in the shadow of having a
Mm,
solo child. The challenge of having a single child is that they don't have someone to play with.
mm,
They don't have an obvious playmate, um, and that is particularly as Hudson, my son, gets older. That's probably a little bit more challenging,
mm,
particularly when we're on holiday. So we do have to probably do a little bit more thinking about like how do we make sure that there will be playmates or like
mm,
entertainment.
yeah.
Because Hudson, he is okay at playing by himself, but he's very good at playing with other children. Like play is really his thing, much more than like organized activities or sports.
Yeah.
But then I think that the biggest challenge that Scott and I have found as Hudson has gotten older is sort of that what you were talking about there. Like there is when you only have one child, all of your like parenting energy,
Mm,
everything that you hope to be as a parent, everything that you hope for as a family dynamic is focused on this one individual. And I
mhm.
think that can be quite intense for the child.
So, Victoria, you use tarot, and would it be fair to say as a tool for personal growth, self exploration, and you use it in a coaching context?
Mm.
Why would someone use tarot for that?
So great question. So tarot essentially is a set of 78 cards with a very clear structure, and collectively those 78 cards um, tell the story of what it means to be human. They are archetypal human experiences depicted in picture form, and we will each recognize parts of our experience, familiar or unfamiliar, in each of the cards. And because it's such a complete picture of human experience, it can help us expand our understanding of what's possible for ourselves in our lives. So the way I use tarot within coaching is a way of helping somebody connect with their own intuition and their own experience. So we can use it in lots of forms. We can use it to figure out what's happening when we get stuck in a situation. We can use it to deepen our awareness and understanding of our own patterns. We can use it to open up new possibilities. But because it's an external picture, it's something outside of our own brain that is also archetypal and universal, the way that we respond to that image, to the energy, to the themes of the card, opens up a new consciousness, a new understanding of a part of our existing human experience.
Love that.
And actually, I did. Can I share a couple of tarot cards?
Yeah. Go for it.
So I did a tarot spread like a few months back after a conflict within the family, and I pulled this card, which is the Devil card. And the Devil card is all to do with power. It's to do with like who holds power, how is that power wielded, and how is power given away or taken. And it was really funny for me because it felt almost like this is Hudson and this is me and Scott. And it can feel like that sometimes when we don't pay attention to it, that like there's a lot of intensity on this single character who is naturally quite a fiery character. He's double Aries. And then Scott and I are almost like, can be a bit like enslaved to feeling like, not even to like what Hudson wants to do, but more like it's our job to steward and guide this one person. So all of our energy is put there. Whereas, as you say, in reality, Hudson is the human being that he is. And there is a large degree to which the choices we make are just part of the picture. And I think when you have multiples, there's more perspective on that truth.
Yep. And I think in general, one of the things that we talk about a lot in my coaching sessions, I feel like this has been increasing, is how intense many of the parents I find are parenting anyway, regardless of whether they've got one child or many children. I feel like the culture has changed to parenting more intensively. Yes. And I think that this has kind of come from the whole gentle parenting narrative has exacerbated this. And I think the pandemic exacerbated this too. And I think, you see so many sort of Instagram content where it's all about sort of like creating play scenarios and like just encouraging people to spend loads and loads of time, like really intensive time, and really understanding their children on this really deep level, and all of that is good. But I wonder, I see a lot of parents who are being really burnt out by this intensity. And, the data shows that people are spending a lot more time with their children than they did 50 years ago. And just the culture has become more intense. Yeah. And then, as you say, I can see this situation where you've got one child where that can get even more intense. One of the things I talk about with my clients is how we can get stuck in what I call a child-centric parenting mode of being. And actually, I think a healthier dynamic is a family-centric. And that looks a bit like, well, sometimes the kids are not going to get their needs met because the parents have to go to B&Q or the supermarket or the post office. And a lot of my coaching sessions recently, how can I go to the supermarket with my kids? And that might sound silly to some people, but for many people, I think they'll do a hard relate to that, because I think parenting has got so child-centric. What we've maybe missed out on is children being able to tolerate being bored and being in adult spaces. But to kind of go on to what I think the shadow side of having more than one child is, for me, I think, is overstimulation. and I'm sure many of the listeners will relate to this. Like, when I think about the hardest part of having more than one child, it's just feeling like there's a lot of noise and I'm kind of being tugged in one direction to another direction. And I think there can be this pervasive sense that I'm not doing enough. And this is a question that I speak with my clients a lot about, is like, how do I know when something is enough? And just the more children you have, I think there's potentially this sense that you're being sort of like tugged from here to there, and feeling a bit like, because the culture has become so much around, you've got to meet your child's needs.
Yeah.
Can feel like, well, I'm not meeting my child's needs because I'm just being tugged in all of these different directions. One of the things that I think it was really interesting in how you framed that, the gift and the shadow. And one of the, tarot is, you use tarot in your coaching with clients, and you run this tarot course. And one of the things and I use tarot and like oracle cards at home, and quite a lot. And I think one of the things that I use it for, and I wonder what you could add to this, is we can be stuck in one way of doing things. And then you kind of ask, this is how I use it. I ask the tarot cards, question like something like, how could I approach this with a different energy? And then the cards might reveal something to me that then it just gets me to kind of reflect. And I wonder what you would kind of add to that around how, whether you use the cards in that way, or I just think it's such a powerful thing for getting unstuck, because we can be in this mindset that there's only one way to deal with a situation as a parent. And we can use the cards to ask the question, well, how could I approach this differently? What would you add to that?
The reason that tarot is so valuable and helpful, exactly as you say, for expanding what feels possible, is because they are holistic, because they represent all that can be possible in the human experience. They inevitably open up new opportunities, new doorways, new possibilities whenever we are stuck, as we all are all the time, in our existing paradigm, how we currently think about things, the stories we currently hold about who we are and what's possible for us. One of my tutors in my master's called it the city wall of the ego. The thing that kind of encloses what currently feels possible for us. So whenever we are stuck somewhere, or whenever we meet something that isn't working, or that feels like, I don't, let's take conflict in a family. I don't want my family dynamic to be this conflictual or, aggy or whatever. We can use tarot, first of all, to zoom in and understand what might be going on. And secondly, to expand outwards, widen the aperture to say what else could be possible. And the last thing I was saying, then maybe we do a little example so that the listeners and the viewers can see how this works. The last thing I would say is the way I use tarot, and the way I think you use it as well, is primarily as a tool for tapping into one's own intuition. I'm not psychic. I do believe that some people do have extrasensory perception skills, and they can tap into consciousness that goes beyond the individual human system. That isn't necessarily what I feel is available to me, but tarot helps us to kind of, the way we respond to a tarot card helps us to connect into a part of our consciousness, a part of our psyche that we might not easily see or have access to, whether it's because it's in our unconscious or because it goes beyond what we have experienced in our life so far. It feels it's in our blind spot, and tarot can bring it into visibility. So I just want to, we're not channeling spirits here. We're using tarot to expand consciousness.
Yeah. Love that. So should we do kind of example question or something like that, where we can, like, because I went on Victoria's what's it called now? Your
With,
course.
Tarot and Transformation for Beginners.
Very good. And it's kind of like coaching yourself through tarot. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, so it's a 6-week online program introducing tarot as a tool for personal growth. And one of the big kind of methodologies that we use is the coaching framework. So asking powerful questions, understanding how you respond to the message of the card, and then like moving yourself forward through a place of stuckness to get from where you are to where you want to be.
Yeah, love that. So what
Yeah.
kind of question could we ask with the...
Well, I mean, I'm wondering if a couple of options. First of all, we could just use the framework we're already using, which
Yeah.
is a gift and a shadow. And I pull a couple of cards for what's the gift and what's another gift and another shadow of a solo child, and you could do it for siblings.
Yeah.
Or we could sort of, cultivate some empathy and say, what do I not understand about having siblings? What
Yeah.
does Emily not understand about parenting a solo child? So, those are two different avenues we could walk down. What are you drawn to?
So the first, I think maybe another gift and shadow to keep it. I quite like that format.
So let's do let's use this framework of a gift and a shadow. So what we'll be doing here is both Emily and I will be shuffling our cards, and then we'll pull two. Well, this is how I'm going to do it. Emily, you can do it differently if you want. I'll be pulling one card with the question, what might be another gift of having a solo child? And then one card, what might be another shadow of having a solo child? And we'll be pulling these cards blind, which means they're face down. So we're allowing something of like synchronicity and meaning that goes beyond just what the conscious mind would choose if it saw the images face up.
Yeah. Okay.
So let's each take a moment to shuffle our cards, spread them or cut them, and see which cards you're drawn to for each of these questions. Another gift of having a solo child, another shadow.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So my gift was
Justice.
Justice. And my shadow was the Four of Swords.
Four of Swords. So I'm going to suggest that we don't necessarily work with the reversal, simply because we're already asking specific questions.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we've already asked like, what is the Justice card is what's the gift, and with any card we're already working with like all of the different parts of that archetype.
Yeah.
So what do you want to share some of what you see in there?
Well, I don't know the cards as well as you do, but I like just the first thing that came up, and I wonder whether it is like, justice. I mean, that's an interesting one, but because, I think one of the gifts I see of having siblings is around conflict and being forced into a situation where you kind of have to manage conflict, and you also kind of have to manage this theme of justice and fairness, and really kind of managing, because one of the biggest things that comes up in the sibling dynamic is the phrase "it's not fair,"
it's not fair,
it's not equul. But seeing that as a gift is sort of a chance to gain skills in that area. You tell me a bit more about the Justice card. What it typically...
Well, I mean, I would have gone with a very, very similar meaning making process, to be honest. Like, justice is all about fairness, equality, balance, the structure of right and wrong. And it's quite a black and white card. Like there's another card, Judgment, which is more to do with like one's own moral compass, one's own sense of what is a life well lived, and what we facing ourselves at Judgment Day, etc. But the justice card is quite right or wrong. It's quite like, no, there are things that are fair,
Yeah.
and there are things that are unfair. And I wonder if having siblings brings children at a much earlier age into relationship with those concepts of right and wrong, fairness and unfairness,
Yeah.
negotiation, and conflict resolution, mediation, all of those things which are to do with the justice energy. And it gives them, a place to practice and hone those skills at an early age. Whereas with and I'm gonna pull up the card that I chose for gift in a second. Whereas with the solo child, you almost have to, the conflict has to be with the parent more.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah.
So what do you want to do? Should we go on to my shadow, or should we do your gift?
No, let's go on to your shadow first.
All right. I'm not sure what to make of this. So tell me something about the Four of Swords.
So the Four of Swords is a card that invites us to rest, and to rest from mental overstimulation. It's funny that you said like overstimulation was one of the shadows. In the traditional, in one of my depictions of the Four of Swords, the person's going like this, like, oh my God.
Yeah.
So the Four of Swords is an invitation to sort of pause and down tools a bit. So putting down all of the kind of the noise, the thinking, the planning, the mental activity that is required as a parent. And I suppose the shadow of that is that those opportunities for rest are less obvious because, as you say, the mental activity is doubled somewhat. If one child isn't screaming for you, the other child will be screaming for you. So the shadow is like the rest periods are less obvious.
And it's funny, actually, because the word that came up to my mind when looking at this card was burnout. Was the word?
It very much can be a card of burnout. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Okay.
What came up for you then?
So interestingly, I'm going to hold them both together. I've pulled 2 9s. Okay, and within the structure of a tarot deck, numerology is part of the kind of structure, for want of a better word, and 9s represent the stage of any experience where things are very full. Like the maximum is 10. 10 is seen as like the culmination of any energy. And the 9s have that energy of like, you're nearly there. Everything's nearly full. And that nearly fullness can either be like, feel really abundant or a little bit too much, a little bit overwhelming. So the first thing to notice is that they're both 9s, and that's quite interesting. So interestingly, my gift card was also reversed. So I do want to maybe just acknowledge that. We'll work with it the right way up. But in, the fact that you pulled justice, where, and we've been talking about how with siblings, from a very young age, a child has to sort of experience the need for conflict and fairness and equality and negotiation and all that stuff. The gift of an only child is that you can give them everything that you can, to a certain degree, give them everything they want. Like the 9 of Cups is a card of all of one's wishes coming true. The cups are to do with emotions and relationships, like the amount of connection and love and less so material stuff, because that would more be like the Pentacles energy, but the amount of emotional resource you can commit to a single child, and therefore, the amount of fulfillment you can get in the relationship is a gift of having a solo child. I'm not saying it's not available, obviously, with siblings. And And that obviously can easily turn into being spoiled. But given that we've pulled this card in the place of gift, I'm taking it as an abundance of
Yeah.
connection,
Mm.
and the ability to kind of, really meet the needs of that parent-child relationship on both sides. And then the shadow I've pulled is the Nine of Wands. And I'm wondering actually if this is related as well to the shadow of the Nine of Cups, because the Nine of Wands can be quite a like, I'm under attack energy, like, seeing threat and challenge from all directions,
Mm.
and the need to like hunker down and like be vigilant.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if that can be the shadow of this abundance of attention.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Where's that taking you?
Yeah. I think that's a really, I think that sums up a lot of the things that my clients who've got one child
Mm,
say.
yeah,
It's an abundance, but then also like
it's an intensity.
the intensity.
Mm,
And this,
yeah,
just to kind of take this to a close and bring some of the themes out. I mean,
mm,
it seems to me like this word intensity has
yeah,
probably been the
yeah,
theme of this podcast episode. And maybe it's,
mm,
intensity in two different flavors.
mm,
Maybe there's the intensity that can come from sort of pouring all of your attention into one child, but then maybe also for the sibling dynamic, it's the intensity of enoughness and being pulled in different directions
yeah,
and kind of overstimulation. And a question wherever listeners are at today to
mm,
maybe reflect on
yeah,
might be something like, how can I reduce intensity?
yes,
And I wonder, in a way, it's like, what's the answer to that question? Like, how can I
mm,
reduce intensity? I mean, for me, one word that's maybe coming up is trust. Trust feels kind of like an anchoring
mm,
word. Trust in the enoughness, trust in your integrity.
mm,
And maybe intensity for me feels very high up in the body, and like trust feels kind of lower. Trust and integrity feel lower down. What's coming up
mm.
for you with that question of how can I reduce intensity?
Well, it's really interesting. When I did that spread a few months ago on the conflict in the family, and I pulled the Devil card, which has 3 figures on.
Mm,
Um, the card I pulled for what else might be possible, which is a question I love within coaching and within
yeah.
tarot, it was actually the Justice card,
Mm,
um, which is obviously much more about balance, equality. And something you said earlier around like the dyads, I think is really interesting, because I think how we try and reduce intensity in our triad is
mm,
by paying more attention to the dyad of me and Scott. And I
yeah.
want to obviously, recognize that not everyone who has a single child has a partner that they're co-parenting with.
Yeah.
But I remember hearing very early on in my parenting journey that it's important for the child to see that they are not always the center of everything. So like, when I come home or when Scott comes home, like we do, obviously we're not always good at this, but like we do try and like tend to our relationship first, whether it's speaking to each other first before we speak to Hudson, or giving each other a kiss, or like, I feel like it's important in order to reduce the intensity of the parenting
Mm, mm,
to also not to pay attention to the dyad that I think gets probably most ignored, which is
mm,
the dyad between the parents,
yeah. Yeah.
um, and how that needs to be seen by the child as of equal importance as their dyad with their mother and their dyad with their father, if
Yeah.
that's the makeup of the family.
Yeah. And I also think, another sort of dyad is the relationship we have with ourselves. So if people are
Yes.
listening to
Yeah.
this and they're solo parents, it's like
Yes.
well, even if they're not, like
Yeah.
everybody is like tending to the relationship with yourself
Yes.
as well, because if we ignore that, that's just bringing more intensity to the parent-child relationship.
Yes, 100%. Yeah. Reducing
Great.
intensity, dissipating it. Beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. So how can people find out more about your work?
About my work. So the easiest places are probably, well, it sort of depends what you're interested in. If you're interested in the tarot work, you can find me at on Instagram at tarot_and_transformation, or tarotandtransformation.com if you're curious about learning more about tarot for personal growth. If you are a leader in the corporate world and you're curious about executive coaching that brings in a lot of spiritual perspective, then you can find me at victoriasmithmurphy.com, where I, do a lot of one-to-one executive coaching partnerships, as well as more leadership development work within organisations.
Great. Thank you so much. And that will all be in the show notes. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
No, it was great fun. Thank you. Lovely to see you.